Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, your host, joined today by Rod Babers and CJ Vogel. Appreciate you guys joining us. For this Saturday, I thought we'd do something a little special for fans, a little something different rather than, do the up-to-date news. I thought we'd take a little broader look at the program as a whole and try to, I don't want to say estimate, but give our best guess as to what the starting lineup might be for the Longhorns on both sides of the ball. We're going to start this morning on the offensive side of the ball. And as we do this, we need to have some parameters or ground rules. And I want to start with this one. We're going to go out of 11 personnel. That's one running back and one tight end. That means 3 wide receivers, 5 offensive linemen, etc. But one running back, one tight end, 11 personnel. And let's start at quarterback, where I think we're probably all in agreement here. Quinn Ewers in year 3. CJ, I'll start with you, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be Quinn's job. He's entering year 3 under Steve Sarkisian. Regardless of what kind of tweets you see or, the media talking points that you want to see spurred up as a result of a QB controversy, whatever, your buddy down the road who has the A&M flag in his front lawn, it's going to be Quinn Ewers. That's pretty cut and clear. He's coming off of a year in which he led Texas to the college football playoff. Texas finished number 3 in the AP poll, in the final AP poll. He had a great year in my eyes. He took that step, that noticeable step that you saw from year 1 to year 2, 3,500 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 picks. It's a pretty good year. You can expect him to grow on that. And there's a reason why right now, as we're filming this, he has, the shortest odds of any player in the country to win the Heisman, tied with Carson Beck. So there's a reason for that. A lot of expectations, a lot of hope for another big jump. And right now he's the clear-cut guy.
You mentioned that jump, CJ. Rod, you agree with, I would imagine, everybody that Quinn Ewers is the guy. There's no doubt about that. But, what do you say to those people that try to assuage their fears that Arch Manning's going to jump in the portal at the moment's notice? I mean, because that seems to be the narrative that's built outside of Austin.
Yeah, that's the national narrative. But the Manning family, I don't think they really care about what the national narrative is. They really don't. I know usually celebrity quarterbacks, they don't come to sit very long. But I think the Mannings right now are very comfortable with Arch Manning just right now being a student athlete, being a college football player. They know the time will come when he has to bear the burden of being a Manning, the full burden of being a Manning, which is starting quarterback, the expectations of it. They know. And I think, honestly, they're fine right now with him just enjoying the experience because, sooner rather than later, it's going to come at him really fast. So I know a lot of people expect, Arch Manning to be itching to play. And it's not really his personality either. I mean, you go look at it, he's not one of those guys that it seems like he's demanding to have his way. He seems like a team-oriented person that honestly wants to, be the guy that actually, for his teammates, do what's best for the overall team. Seems like he is one of those guys. We haven't heard a peep, really, out of Arch Manning since he's been here. Now, even social media-wise, he hadn't even said anything on social media other than I think he got a NIL deal for a charitable organization, and I think that was part of it. So, he's I think people, because he's a Manning, they expect him to, want to be the celebrity Manning right away. And I don't necessarily think that's the case for him or the family right now.
Yeah, I don't either, Rod. I think you've got a good point there, and a really good one, actually, in that I think he's extraordinarily competitive and would love to be the guy in Austin right now. But to your point, I also think he's a team player and understands what's best. And so those two are going to be the top 2. I think the third will be the newcomer, Trey Owens. You guys all agree with that one because otherwise it would be a walk-on. And one of the players did opt out and transfer to Appalachian State. That's Charles Wright. He grad transferred to Appalachian State. He would have otherwise probably been the third-string quarterback. Let's move on to running backs. Rod, I want you to take us through this group because I think it's one of the more enigmatic groups on campus because they're all talented and they all have their own little specialty almost. What do you think of the running back group, and what do you have for us on the depth chart?
Yeah, I love what you said about the speciality. It seems like CJ Baxter won the job initially, even this year with Jonathan Brooks having a breakout campaign and being the front runner at most of the season for the Doak Walker Award before he ended up with the injury. And right now, I still believe Mel Kiper has him as the top running back on the board, even with the injury. So before that, CJ Baxter won the job as a true freshman. And I've gotten a chance to meet the kid. He's exceptional in a lot of ways, not just physically, but honestly, he's got a great spirit. He's got great football character, just great character overall. I found the young man to be honestly really just really impressive, just extraordinary. Just getting to know him as a person. So I think he's going to be your guy, but him and Jaden Blue are going to share that load a lot more than people think. I do believe they're in the backfield at the same time. Of course, I asked the young man about that too. I think that's going to happen, that pony package, but I do think it'll be the change of pace, right? Jaden Blue's a guy that electric can hit the edge, can threaten teams on the perimeter, has got next level speed, tracked as the fastest running back in the country last year by real analytics. And then you have CJ Baxter in between the tackles, who I think can be a guy that really can be a grinder. I mean, when I saw him, man, he looks like a linebacker. I mean, he's bigger than a linebacker already. And so he's got really a formidable, imposing physique for a running back. And I think that he's a guy, once they pack on that armor with him in the offseason, he's going to be able to take a lot of those hits a lot better. I don't think he'll be dealing with the nicks and the slight injuries that he had to deal with as a freshman. So I think he's going to, then you start looking at the other guys, right, that you have thrown in there. I mean, what's going to happen with a guy like Savion Red? I have no idea what's going to happen with Savion Red and how they're going to use Savion Red. Right? It's a guy that went from wide receiver to running back. Then you got the young running backs they got coming in, and a really impressive group that running backs they got coming in. But I think your frontline guys easily going to be CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue, and I think that's going to be 75 to 80% of your rushes right there. If, knock on wood here, assuming everybody stays healthy, that's the bulk of your running game right there. That's it. Now, in terms of the personnel groupings and how they're going to play them, I do think you're going to see some of those two running back packages, like I said. And I do wonder who's going to be the Keelan Robinson of the group. Savion Red, like I said, he's a guy to play wide receiver and play running back. Is it time to start making specialized packages for him? Or they take one of those other guys, one of those freshmen who may be a little bit faster, who may have some bursts that Sark likes. Does he make a specialized package for him? That third spot's going to be a little bit interesting, but the 1 and 2 spot are pretty solidified at this moment.
So 1A and 1B basically are Baxter and Blue. I think CJ, I see you nodding your head. The one I'm interested in here is Trey Wisner, because I think he might be that boutique guy that you're talking about, even though I think he could be more than that eventually. Because he has that explosiveness that Keelan Robinson also had. Savion Red doesn't necessarily have that, be able to take it all the way to the house kind of from 60 or 70 yards out, whereas Keelan Robinson could really press you there. And then the other piece, how does he mix in this year, the two freshmen, Christian Clark, Jarrett Gibson? We don't know. I mean, that's to your point, Rod, you mentioned that. I mean, we don't know what are they going to demand that they get some action? Does that make sense? Are they so good that you're starting saying, okay, well, instead of CJ Baxter being my short yardage back, is it really Jarrett Gibson that needs to be the short yardage back? That kind of stuff where, I mean, you never know. I will say this. I expect a big improvement year over year from CJ Baxter as I do anybody on this roster. From freshman to sophomore campaign. All right, let's go to receiver. I think we talked about running backs enough. Wide receiver, CJ, Rod. I mean, give me a break. They bring in 3 guys that have high-level production. Isaiah Bond from Alabama, Silas Bolden from Oregon State, Matthew Golden from the University of Houston. They join a group of young guys, Jonte Cook, going to be a true sophomore, DeAndre Moore, Ryan Niblett. And then a guy like Ryan Wingo comes in, a guy like Parker Livingstone. Where does Texas go? Now, you can only pick 3 now. We made this decision beforehand. CJ, I'm going to give everybody a chance to go with their 3. But I'm going to start with you. Who are your 3 starters at wide receiver?
All right. I'll give first crack at it.
This is the first hard one. This is the first hard one.
This is a tough one. And It took me some time because, there's a lot of production coming in. And I think there's one guy specifically in which you can point to on this wide receiving group and say, there's no production there, but there's high expectations, and that's Jonte Cook. And right now, I have Jonte Cook penciled into my starting rotation. Mm-hmm. I have him in my starting 11. I loved what I saw out of DeSoto. He had 8 receptions this past year. I thought there were signs of him after the catch. I thought there were signs of him going down the field for big plays as well. I thought that you saw a little bit of what you expected to see from Jonte Cook out of high school. His leg up on the newcomers coming in is he's been familiar with the system and he's been around Quinn Ewers for a year. That's where he has a little bit of an advantage there. Now I go to my other 2 receivers and I look at Isaiah Bond, who I think will eventually be the wide receiver 1 for Texas this year. He was wide receiver 1 for Alabama, put up a pretty solid year. Statistically, obviously, he had the big moment against Auburn. And then I have Matthew Golden as well. And so that's where I'm stuck, because that leaves Silas Bolden on the sidelines for this starting rotation, who had 55 receptions this past year for 750 yards. That's a lot of production that I have sitting on my bench right now. And that hurts to say, because that's a very talented player. And I know Sarkisian is eager to use his speed and twitchiness in a lot of different, creative ways. But right now, I love that the 3 of those guys that I have in my rotation are so interchangeable and so similarly, kind of framed in their athleticism, their frames. You can throw them anywhere and have the playbook completely open, because they don't hinder you in any ability or tip off any tendencies in what you might do because of alignment.
All right. We've already got a disagreement, but I'm going to let Rod go first. Rod, you're next, buddy. What do you think about that group?
Yeah, man, it is tough. All right, this is first world problems, man. This is where you want to be right here. Okay, so I think honestly, my man CJ nailed it. I do. I think he nailed it. I can't see Jonte Cook, not penetrating the starting group of wide receivers. He's got so much talent. I've been so excited about, the possibilities of what he can do. So I'm going to say, and Cook, last season you can start trying to sprinkle Cook out there, and even remarked, and late in the season, I got to get Jonte Cook out there more. I got to get him out there more. So, yes, he wants his transfer portal additions to shine so he can keep that transfer portal pipeline of receivers coming. But he also wants the receivers that he's recruiting to also see the path, see themselves through the recruiting path, like an Xavier Worthy, like a Jonte Cook. I can go in Sark's offense and I can flourish and I can thrive. So Cook is in there. I'm going with Bond. Bond was wide receiver 1. I think, that's a guy he's got wide receiver 1 written all over him. That would mean you got 2 of them out there potentially. And, oh, man, it hurts me too, but I'm going to go with Golden. I think Golden's body type. I think CJ's nailed it once again. It's the body type, man. Sark wants position fluidity. He does. And these guys have similar explosivity as players, just in their own different ways. So I'll go with Golden. And I'll say Bolden is the boutique player. He takes over where Keelan Robinson has left a void. It's not from the running back position, but still he's a muse that inspires Sark to utilize him in some freaky, crazy ways, exotic ways. So I'll say that's what Bolden is. But my 3, same as CJ, man. CJ nailed it.
Oh boy, I got to go different than you guys. I have to. Look, Bolden, and here's my thing. I went with Cook, Bond, and Bolden, so not Golden. Okay. Of all those 3 incomers, Bolden had more catches than any of them this past year. 54 catches. So I just think that he's more of an every down guy, even though he's small. I mean, he is tiny. He lists at 5'8", 5'9". He might be 5'8", 5'7".
Yeah.
So I get it. I'm not saying that I'm 100% right here, but I think he's too explosive. And I think he's too battle tested. Even more so than Matthew Golden, for example.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's where I'm at. I do think you have to get Isaiah Bond and Jonte Cook on the field as well. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's where I'm at. I've got another guy that I think that Ryan Wingo may be ahead of schedule. Maybe even ahead of Jonte Cook's schedule because of physical stature. If they start wanting a bigger wide receiver set, I don't know that they're going to have anybody else to go to other than Ryan Wingo. Well, I mean, that's one of mine. And then DeAndre Moore is somebody that we're not even talking about here. We'll see how he figures into all this as well. But I think, to Rod's point, first world problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really what it is at the wide receiver for the Longhorns. All right, let's move on to offensive line because there's some movement there as well. I think we can all agree on. First of all, I'm going to go start. I'll go left to right, and I'm going to give you mine. And I'm going to go left tackle. I'm going to go our friend Kelvin Banks, All-American. Left guard, I'm going Cole Hudson.
Ooh, okay.
Hudson. Center, Jake Majors. Right guard, DJ Campbell. Right tackle, Cam Williams. That means that Neto Umeozulu and Cole Hudson fought it out, and Hudson won. We'll see if that comes to pass, because that's more the 50-50 toss-up for me. The key here is right tackle, where I think Cam Williams is going to beat out Hayden Conner, because Hayden Conner is going to try to win that role. I think Texas is going to go more powerful on the interior against the SEC opponents, and that means Neto and or Cole Hudson at left guard and DJ Campbell at right guard. All right, that's my prediction. CJ, you want to go next?
That's good.
I'll take a stab at it, and I'm similar to you. I got Kelvin Banks at left tackle. Left guard is the big question to me. I think everything else is not set in stone, but I've got it in pencil right now. It's not yet pen. The ink isn't dry, but it's looking good. Does Hayden Conner, with his 27 career starts and 35 game appearances, does he get upseated? That's a lot. We talk about experience. It's important on the offensive line specifically. That's a lot. Cole Hudson has a year of starting experience as well, but that was a year removed. He's kind of been dinged up, necessarily didn't play a whole lot towards the end of this past season. I know he's got the juice in him, and if you want to be more physical in that interior offensive line, no better than getting a guy who has a history playing in the wing T up at Frisco High. That's Cole Hudson. And then we saw the nastiness with Nato, and I think there's a little bit of a flip switch there that he found late in the season, in which he's like, oh, yeah, I belong here. I can play with these guys, and I can dominate these guys. It's going to be a battle between the three of them. Right now, I have to go with the incumbent. I think that Hayden Conner, as a result of the experience, is that guy right now. I would love to see, obviously that competition breed the best player possible. Right now, this far out, I have to go with the guy who's been around the block. And obviously, Jake Majors, DJ Campbell. I think Cam Williams wins that right tackle spot pretty easily. I think what he possesses in terms of physical stature, his arm length as well, and just overall athleticism, which isn't talked about enough at 6'7", 370, 360, whatever he is, he's a freak by all means of the word, in the positive way. He is a very talented prospect, and it wouldn't surprise me at all to see him taken in the first 2 days of an NFL draft, whether it be next year or the year after.
All right, Rod, what do you think about the O-line?
Oh, that's good. Right tackle, I'm going to go with Cam Williams. I think it's his job to lose, pretty much. I like DJ Campbell at the right guard. Jake Majors, that goes without saying. Right? That was the easiest one. Kelvin Banks, that's also very easy at left tackle. Left guard, I went with Hayden Conner too. And I went with the experience, but also just considering, because I was talking to Jake Majors about this on Third and Longhorn. Shout out to him, because the guy had to speak to him. And he kept talking about how the offensive line, how they work as a unit and work together, and the chemistry between the offensive linemen and how much that matters. And man, Hayden Conner, and he got chemistry. He's got a lot of experience on the O-line. I'll go with him. I agree with you though, Bobby, about the power element of the offensive line. They want to bring that power running game, and Hayden Conner may not necessarily bring that, but I think the chemistry that he's got with the other guys on that O-line, the experience, it may win the day, even though he doesn't have the highest upside.
He's played in a lot of big games. I don't. Again, this is best guess and estimate. So I hear both of you guys. All right, last position we want to tackle, and I did this one somewhat purposely. It's tight end, because I think Gunnar Helm is clearly the better blocker. And if you're using just simple 11 personnel, or what should I call contemporary 11 personnel, or
good, yeah, like that.
you would go with Gunnar Helm over Amari Niblack. Yep. You start talking about spreading them out, you'd go with Amari Niblack 10 times out of 10. And so I wanted to get y'all's take on this, because I think it's one of the more fundamental questions that we have for Sark's offense this year, actually. Is he going to be more spread? Is he going to be more power? What does it look like? I mean, he can run a lot of 20 personnel in this year. I mean, but if he's running 11, what did y'all? I went with Helm. I'm just gonna. I'll let y'all fight it out for the rest of this.
I will say this. Disagree. I think also that's going to be a determining factor with wide receiver too. What kind of offense do we want to be in terms of the body types that CJ was talking about? Because Silas Bolden, he lends himself to a certain type of offense, and you can get explosive having a guy like that out there. So I understand where you're coming from, Bobby. I'll say it is Gunnar Helm too, because Sark, he says the tight end position is the second most important position behind quarterback to him. And the reason he is saying that's because of the balance the tight end brings, the fuses, the spread element, and the power running game. It fuses it together. He likes to hunt matchups with it, but he won't necessarily do that with Gunnar Helm. I'm going to say because Gunnar Helm knows the offense, has familiarity with the offense, that he initially is the starter. I would not be surprised at all, though, if you went back and looked at the reps and looked at them at the end of the season, that him and Nyblack were pretty much close to even in terms of the reps, if Nyblack works out the way they think, because he's the guy that's a nightmare for an opposing defensive coordinator. He's nightmare fuel. And Gunnar Helm is steadier, more Simon Sound probably, like I said, better blocker. All right, but I don't know. I don't see him as a matchup advantage. Amari Nyblack is a matchup advantage, but he might be a disadvantage blocking.
I'm with you. CJ, which way you going? You going Helm or Nyblack here?
I had Helm as well. So we'll take the sweep on the tight end spot, but I think this is the one spot offensively where you can point to and say this might be a tendency indicator with Sarkisian. You know, with Helm in there, you might be sitting around and thinking, all right, like he's obviously a little bit heavier in the foot in terms of, you know, run blocking. He can obviously sit back and pass block it well as well. Nyblack, not necessarily a true negative in that sense, but he isn't as polished as Gunnar Helm. But if you have Nyblack in as that number one tight end and the only tight end on the field, as you mentioned, Rod, he's a mismatch waiting to happen. He's a guy that can run by you at 6'4", and it certainly lends itself to defensive coordinators sitting around and being like, all right, like we certainly have to hone in now on what Sarkisian might be trying to do with these three wide receivers that we mentioned. Oh yeah. And this kind of deer-like tight end that can run with just about anybody. So that's kind of the pause that I have at tight end, because, you know, it could tip tendencies in a way that Sarkisian doesn't often do. And so, I'd like to see Gunnar Helm get involved early in the season in the passing game. He had 14 receptions for just under 200 yards this past season. So if you can get him involved early, I think that basically negates anything that you can point to and say, Helm is in, we know it's going to be a run, or we know that he's not going to be going vertically down the field, down the seam, or in the crossing routes that we saw J.T. Sanders do. That's where I get some pause. But if you see that early involvement, it then lends you to say, all right, Sark can now go 12 personnel and have both of these guys running deep crossers, and Quinn can pick basically where he wants to go. It opens up the playbook a little bit more, and it keeps Sark away from tipping his hand, which is the most important part.
I got an X factor here for you guys. Malik Ogbo.
Yeah.
What do you do with him? 12. That's going to be crazy, because Sark's got a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. He just does. And I think that may be the moral of the story here, as we really talk about it. Because, I mean, you talk about quarterback, and we're talking about Arch Manning and, you know, being the backup, et cetera. I mean, you talk about running back, and we're debating whether or not who's going to be the boutique back and who does this. And then wide receiver, there's a lot of options. Tight end's different. Offensive line has so many starts returning, it's ridiculous.
Yep.
To y'all's point. All in all, the offense should be the strength of the team next year. I think that is probably fair to say. The defense at time helped lead the team this year, especially the interior. But anyways, I think next year the offense more clearly, just from what we're talking about here, has that grouping. All right, that's going to do it for this morning's On Texas Football. We're going to be back this afternoon because we're getting ready to try to talk a little defense here in a little bit as well, and try to give you what we think the starting defensive lineup looks like prior to spring ball as well. All right, for CJ and Rod, thanks for watching On Texas Football. Welcome.